not everyone follows a linear path from
Right.
addiction to recovery or trauma to healing. And I think, you said it at the beginning, and I think to kind of just wrap that, bring it full circle, is it's a personalized treatment plan, if you will, or a personalized journey that we find ourselves.
Absolutely. And people need to understand it is not one size fits all. And so many people, I think, get turned off of recovery because they maybe do go to certain meetings and they go, these aren't my people. I can't relate to these people. This isn't for me. If you have tried that, if you've tried approach number one, number two, and it hasn't worked, please don't give up hope. There's so many other ways to heal.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sobriety Diaries, a video podcast where we share powerful stories of recovery that inspire hope and offer support to those affected by addiction. I'm your host, Nate Kelly, creator of the show and recovering alcoholic 8.5 years from my last drink. I'm also a lover of human connection. I started the show during the pandemic when I lost that connection, and it has grown beyond my wildest dreams. We just surpassed 1 million downloads. So thank you so much for that support, and let's open today's diary. Today's guest is a licensed psychologist, an addiction and trauma specialist, an empowerment coach. We were introduced to each other through my friend TJ Woodward. I want to get to know how you and TJ crossed paths. Please welcome Dr. Adriana Popescu. Adriana, how are you today?
I'm great, Nate. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, I love to talk about
He's
TJ.
the best.
He's one of my favorite people. Yes. He and I actually crossed paths many years ago working at a drug and alcohol rehab program together. So I think we felt very aligned in how we were seeing working in recovery, and a lot of his, the early seeds for conscious recovery were just kind of percolating in his world, and they were in mine
Yes.
too. So I think we really bonded over that. And so when he started writing books and he came out with Conscious Being, his first book, he gave me a copy and I said, this is amazing. And I wonder what's possible for helping people take a deeper dive with this material. Maybe you should create a workbook or something so people can take these concepts and really apply them to their own lives. And he's like, that's a great idea. Do you want to help me write it?
That's amazing. And now
Yeah.
many resources and workbooks and a trilogy now. I think there are currently
Yes.
three in the Conscious trilogy so
Yeah.
far.
And many
But that's,
workbooks. Yeah, we've done four
yes,
together.
that's awesome. I didn't know I was going to get such an impactful story about TJ right out of the gate. You were kind of both in the early genius of one another's career. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. And he's such a gift to work with. He's so inspiring, and I love doing things with him. Like he's been a guest on my podcast a few times, and we're gearing up for a 100th episode. And he was the first person I thought of in celebrating, this milestone. Wanting him there because when we get in each other's presence, it's like the energy magnifies, and there's
Yeah.
the message I think is so positive and so empowering. What we're both trying to get out there to people, it's like, I wrote a book called "What If You're Not as Effed Up as You Think You Are." Like
Yes.
I think we're so, and so many of us, yourself included, even in this, we're seeking to give people hope. We're seeking to give people information. So many people are in this very dark place, especially with addiction, and especially with trauma.
Yes. Yes.
Everything, and in the world right now, everything feels so very dark and hopeless. And if we can be a light of hope, for folks with our podcasts, with the written stuff we put out there, with our work with clients, whatever it may be, I think that's why we're here right now at this time on this planet in this very transformative, intense period.
It's, I think, a great way to start the conversation and maybe offer some resources or some exercises, if you can, just about a time in our lives, in our history, where everything seems to be so heavy and so dark
Yes.
and not many people may not have an outlet to turn to. If you do find yourself in this kind of dark place with no outlet, what are some things that you recommend patients of yours or colleagues or others who are looking for resources?
Well, I think it's a great question, and I think it really depends on the person. Like I'm somebody who is around people all day, so when I come home, I need peace and quiet. I really need
Yes.
solace and alone time. I need that alone time to recharge, and that may mean, I had to move out of the city recently, and I'm now living in the woods. Um, and so time in nature is super important.
So
Quiet
important.
time, listening to music, watching silly shows. I mean, I'm still watching the Golden Girls and Seinfeld all these years later. I never get enough of those shows. They make me smile.
Yes.
Small things, right? A delicious meal, your favorite food, like super small, inspiring. Like if you have like podcasts, or I have sometimes workshops that I listen to with some of my mentors that I find inspiring. But like music, singing is a recent one for me. Is like starting to sing, dancing around, moving my body, anything that gets me more grounded and in this beautiful, like I'm looking outside and seeing redwood trees, like that to me I find inspirational. And also like people, if you're somebody who really thrives off connection with people, having people in your life that you feel safe with, people whom you can trust and open up to, who can be there for you when you just need to vent or you need a hug. I think that's really key as well. Dr. Gabor Mate, who's also very aligned, I think, with TJ and myself and the message we're trying to put out there. And he talks about addiction as being a social and a connection issue. Like people are not feeling connected in the world, especially post pandemic. They're still not feeling connected. People are isolated. They lack that kind of social support. And I think that's a big part of what drives people into these dark places of despair and addiction and hopelessness, depression, all those things. So, who are the people that you have or could have that would support you in not feeling so alone and feeling like maybe you're not the only one who's struggling, because a lot of people are right now, and just knowing that can be a comfort.
Yes. I think that's true. Feeling a sense of community or a likeness. For me, there was always this um, not feeling a part of, growing up and even long into my addiction and even recovery, really. So to feel that strength of community, even if it is, for not something that in and of itself is a happy thing, I think can bring some joy in a small way.
Yes. Yeah, small pleasures. And then also I think in this time what I've seen a lot of people, especially again with the pandemic, is a lot of people sort of questioning on a more on a deeper level, like what am I doing with my life? Is this the life I've been wanting to live? I feel that many people, and I've been guilty of this myself, are looking to the future, like that someday when I have
Yeah.
blank, someday when I finally finish this degree, this book, this whatever project, finally when I get those letters after my name or make that money in my bank account or have the white picket fence and that whole thing, um then I'll be happy, right? So it's always deflected off into the future, and you don't ever really get to have that now. And I think for me, honestly, the milestone was turning 50, and I was like, oh my God, now I have fewer days ahead of me than behind me.
Ah,
Am I living the life I want to be living? What am I still waiting for to happen? And how long am I going to be waiting for it? Or is it time to maybe take some action or reassess how my life is going so that I can start moving it in the direction of my dreams and my vision of what I would like my life to be? And if you don't have that vision, then maybe it's time to start looking at that. Like, what do I want to create
mm.
with my life?
Hey, recovery warriors. I wanted to introduce a new way to connect with you, our amazing community, and the reason I turn on the microphone week after week and create episodes that inspire hope for those affected by addiction. We created a voicemail line for your recovery questions, issues you may be having with your journey, mental health concerns, or sobriety tips and tricks for others. Any and all of the above. Hey, you could even just call to say hi. We will be incorporating these into some upcoming episodes, and this is a way for you to contribute hope to our listeners. I absolutely love hearing from you guys. So please utilize this feature to add your voice to our show. Talk soon. Call 707-385-1595 to leave us your message today. That's 707-385-1595, or check today's show notes for a direct link. You mentioned briefly the podcast, and we recently, well, semi recently, also just celebrated 100 episodes. So,
Yes.
um, Kaleidoscope of Possibilities. I know it's more of a sort of mental health umbrella, but there are definitely addiction and recovery notes within the podcast.
Hmm.
What has your podcasting experience been like, particularly within, such a vulnerable and personal niche?
Yeah. It's really been amazing. It wasn't something I knew anything about, right? So I think a lot of us have learned along the way,
Yes.
like how to even do this. But I think the biggest pleasure for me has been getting to invite folks onto the podcast. Many of my mentors, many of the people I respect and admire so much who have inspired my career, who helped me learn about these different modalities. We really do feature a lot the subtitle of the podcast is Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. So I'm really looking at health and wellness through this very holistic lens, including the spirituality piece, including how other cultures might see things like mental illness, like what a shaman sees in a mental institution is one of my favorite articles. And I so wish I'd gotten to interview Dr. Somé before he passed away a couple of years ago. But he wrote this wonderful article as an African man who had studied shamanism or came from that tradition and then came to America and went to psych hospitals. He came to study social work and he went to these psych hospitals and he was watching these people being, doped up with meds and sometimes even like, tied down and different things. Like, what are you doing to these folks? They're being called by the spirit world to do healing work and you're, medicating them and thinking there's something wrong with them. And it just these cross-cultural perspectives that are
Wow.
so much more, I think, empowering than what our Western paradigms. Sometimes it diminishes things to like, well, it's a brain disorder or you have a chemical imbalance. That approach hasn't really seemed to help people. A lot of people have not benefited from that particular. I'm not, naysaying anything about Western medicine, and meds do have their place, but sometimes I think that's the only tool they've got, and we need to be looking at things through a much broader lens because it's so much more complex than that. And a lot of things that we don't understand, we want to pathologize rather than looking at it as what if it's a strength or a capacity. Like
Mm.
nowadays with ADHD, autism, we still, the Western model is to look at them as disorders. But what if it's more like neurodivergence? I love that whole movement, right?
Yes.
My brain
Yes.
works differently than yours. That doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean I'm disabled in some kind of way. My brain is different and I learn differently and I need different ways of communicating with people. And I need maybe different tools to help me deal with my sensitivity to other people, things like that. People haven't been having those conversations, and I wanted my podcast to start bringing those conversations out into the world and really just educating people, informing them like, hey, there's another way to see this. There are many other tools out there that are incredibly powerful for creating change. It isn't just about pills and talk therapy. So that's really been my greatest joy is to get the message out there and to know that it's changing people's lives. I'm sure you get feedback sometimes from your listeners and viewers as well. I love hearing that, the information out there is doing good in somebody's life. If even one person
Yes.
listens to this and something pings in their world, something sparks for them and they have like one glimmer of light or of hope, like then the all the work has been worth it.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I say it often. If this episode, is meaningful to one person, I think you and I have done our job here. So I know you sort of mentioned, thinking or looking at things in a broader lens or thinking at, looking at them from a different angle, what society, I guess, deems as normal or deems as a way to treat alcohol use disorder, and you kind of frame it from, in a addiction and recovery lens as well, right? Like these sort of box or cookie cutter modalities that we've come to follow, at least in the US, AA, or to your point, talk therapy, but to look at it from a different approach and think, outside of what society has taught us is the way to treat them.
Absolutely. And I think it's naive for any kind of healer, health practitioner, or whatever to think I have the answers or
Yes.
like this modality is the way, the one and only way. And unfortunately, we have some of that dogmatic thinking that comes with some people are coming from the biological medical side saying, as soon as we understand how all the genes work and then we can tailor these medicines to change people's brain imbalances, like they think that's the answer. All right. And then you've got potentially people in like 12 step thinking this is the way. And if you
Yeah.
don't do it this way, the way we've outlined it here, you're not going to stay sober. And I like to look at it as it's a giant buffet of different dishes. Let's sample different ones and see what works. Because what works for you in your recovery is going to be completely different than what works for someone else. And I think, if anything, trauma, our newer understanding of the biology of trauma has shown us that so much of what we are dealing with, whether it's addiction, depression, trauma, it has to include the body. The body keeps the score, right? Bessel van der Kolk's,
Yes.
wonderful work.
Yes.
Trauma is locked in the body. Talking about your trauma, telling the story over and over again is not going to be sufficient for you to heal from it. Pretending it didn't happen and pushing it away and saying, oh, just get over it, that's in the past, live in the present and for the future, that doesn't work either when you are still suffering from symptoms of your unresolved trauma or grief or whatever it is. It's still there, it's still with you, and it's affecting you in one way or another until you actually identify it and work your way through it. I have yet to find any way around trauma but to go through it.
It's a great point. Not everyone follows a linear path from
Right.
addiction to recovery or trauma to healing. And I think, you said it at the beginning, and I think to kind of just wrap that, bring it full circle, is it's a personalized treatment plan, if you will, or a personalized journey that we find ourselves from, um, point A to point B. And I think all of these things that we've kind of discussed can contribute to one of those.
Absolutely. And people need to understand it is not one size fits all. And so many people, I think, get turned off of recovery because they maybe do go to certain meetings, not even TOSA, it could be one of the other kinds of meetings that are out there. And they go, these aren't my people. I can't relate to these people. This isn't for me. And then they throw the whole baby out with the bathwater, right? So if you have tried that, if you've tried approach number one, number two, and it hasn't worked, please don't give up hope. There are so many other ways to heal. So many people have healed with like energy work, everything from Reiki to other kinds of quantum type, healing. And I mean, hands-on healing has been done for millennia. Many people can heal in that kind of way and get tremendous results. It doesn't even have to be cognitive, verbal, in the traditional psychological sense. There's just so many paths to healing, and people just don't know what they are. So I guess my point in being a podcast host, in writing books, in now I'm speaking a lot at conferences, trying to educate my fellow professionals. Like, hey, did you know there's this whole branch of psychology called energy psychology? It's been around for 40 plus years, and there's a lot of modalities that are scientifically studied, evidence-based, hundreds of research studies, and people don't even know. In my own field, they don't know about these things, and they think it's this weird woo-woo stuff until you say, okay, here's an MRI of somebody's brain before and after using this more holistic approach. Maybe it's tapping on acupuncture points, and look, it seems to change something for people. It changes something in the brain. So in a way, it's almost like the science and technology has finally allowed us to show what we in our therapy rooms have known for a while now about how this more holistic stuff really can work and help people's bodies and psyches and their spirit to heal.
Hey, podcasters, are you ready to turn up the volume on your podcast? Let's talk about taking your show from just okay to unforgettable. I'm Nate Kelly, creator and host of the Sobriety Diaries and founder of Pod Studio, a full service podcast production studio. And we're looking for a select few hosts who are ready to level up your podcast and scale your brand. Whether you're a seasoned host or just getting started, our team specializes in production and editing, as well as marketing that gets your message heard and creates lasting partnerships that, you guessed it, can monetize your show. Audio is king. So we'll start by making sure your episodes sound crisp, your message is crystal clear, and your audience growing with every episode. We offer different packages and service levels to fit any budget and guarantee our results. Head over to podcastnate.com/services or click the link in today's show notes for more information, and we'll see you on the charts. Now, is energy therapy, tell me a little bit more about that. And is it tied to like a massage therapy? Do you use them in conjunction, or is it about like the physical touch and pressure point, like you mentioned?
It's many different things. A lot of the modalities actually do come from traditional healing methods. So you have, for example, traditional Chinese medicine, which is where acupuncture comes from. And there's a whole branch in energy psychology of modalities that are meridian, they're considered meridian based. Meridians are those energy pathways that travel through the body. And so things like tapping, EFT, emotional freedom techniques, involves thinking about different stressors, emotional distress, or it could be like a craving, for example, to want to drink or use. And you're tapping on these different acupuncture points, which the Chinese would have said, in their 5,000 years of using it,
Yeah.
balances the energy flows in the body, allows blockages to be released, allows too much energy to be balanced or not enough. And then when you have a balanced body, the body can heal itself. That's the premise there. You also have traditional Indian medicine, things like Ayurveda and the chakras. That comes from working, if you're doing hands-on work involving chakras, that might come from an Indian tradition. And then there's Reiki came from a Japanese tradition. So you have a lot of these modalities based on, traditional healing practices, hands-on, the laying of hands as part of it. And then there are newer modalities. Access consciousness is another one that I work with a lot, and that might involve touching these different points on the head that helps release the electromagnetic charge that comes from thinking and feeling. And and a lot now what we understand about a lot of these modalities is that they're working with the amygdala, which is the emotional center of your brain that activates the fight, flight, freeze response. So the reason the tapping in particular works is because when you're stimulating those points, the acupoints, you're sending an electrical signal through the fascia, that connective tissue that covers your muscles and bones and skin and everything. You're sending an electrical signal up to the amygdala, and you're telling it to calm down. Like, we're not in a life or death situation. We're not being chased by lions right now, and it's okay for our bodies to be calm. What's happening for a lot of people who are emotionally dysregulated, right? So someone might be having a panic attack, they're having anxiety, or they're having like an intense stress response and they want to go drink and use to calm themselves down. What if you could calm the nervous system down with these other tools, so there isn't the need to turn to drugs, alcohol, food, or whatever the other behavior might be to calm that brain down? Essentially, it's like your brain is on fire and it needs calming. And these modalities allow us to do that in a very safe way, with no side effects, with no potential harm being done to the body. So that's what I really like about them. We're essentially giving people other strategies for dealing with what is causing them to want to drink and use in the first place. Long answer to your question.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's framed so perfectly, and I think this at least I think in our generation it is being talked about more. Being neurodivergent and it not necessarily be, I think we're cracking the stigma, but I feel like we're still so far at the beginning of it and learning so much each day, and how many different nuances there can be and how individualized it can be to each person. So I love seeing, new challenging information, being put out there. So I love, I was binging some of your episodes today. I had, I was looking, I can't remember if I saw it maybe in one of the show notes or heard it. Um, but you said, what if mental health isn't everything we've been told?
Yeah.
And I think, we've sort of touched on that or started to kind of crack the, surface of that. But I guess in the context of recovery, how do you frame that to folks? We've got a lot of people in early recovery that listen, but that stood out to me, and I wanted to frame it in a way that makes sense, maybe to someone who's still struggling.
Sometimes I don't even know if it's recovery. I mean, I sometimes think it's more of a process of discovery. So much of what happens for people with addictions is they it's like they've created an identity for themselves, and they have a lot of sort of TJ loves to talk about like how like our belief systems, our BS
Yeah,
systems,
yeah, yeah.
especially our core false beliefs, right?
Right.
They get planted, the seeds for that get planted so early, and then when you believe something about yourself to be true, like I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, there's something wrong with me. When you come to believe those things are true, you're going to then be attracted to people, and you're going to attract people, places, things, situations that are going to mirror back to you the truth of that belief. So what I see a lot with addicts is that there's this underlying, core false belief system of these negative ways of seeing oneself. So it makes it really hard when people believe that, and they're not always even conscious of it, right? A lot of times it's just in your subconscious
Very
programming.
true.
But it makes it really hard for people to be successful with things like recovery because, and I'm sure you've seen this a million times or even experienced it. People will start to do the work and their life starts getting better. And then it's almost like it's too good
Yeah.
and it's too out of their comfort zone.
Right.
And so they find a way to like kind of self sabotage
Yes.
everything. And then they're right back at square one. Oh, see, I really am that loser. I
Yeah.
am not good enough. Like I can't even succeed at recovery. So if we look at it through the lens of discovery, what if it's more like in this process of doing this work, I'm learning things about myself or challenging the things I thought I knew about myself to that I thought were true, and living in the question and discovering that maybe they're not true. Maybe I'm not effed up like that. Maybe I picked up that belief when I was a little kid because somebody who believed it themselves, maybe they got told that by their parents and their parents before them. Maybe there's an intergenerational thing here, or maybe they got bullied by somebody who was being bullied and they thought, little kids think, well, it must be all about me, right? And if somebody tells me I'm not enough or I'm indirectly getting this message, then I'm going to think it's my fault, right? And so when we start to question the child's beliefs and conclusions that they came to, and you start realizing, wow, like I'm a computer operating on an OS that's like ancient and so needs an update, then I think it's more about discovering something new that you didn't know was there rather than recovering. TJ might, through a conscious recovery lens, we might say recovering those parts of yourself that you got cut off from.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. And also, what parts are there that you didn't even know were there?
Yes.
That if you would
I,
connect with them,
yes.
like your wholeness and your wellness and fundamental wholeness and perfection, if you could connect with that, I wonder what your life could evolve into and what your recovery could lead you to.
I'm sort of obsessed with this idea now of discovery because I think it speaks to the fact, too, when I got out of treatment and started having normal feelings and normal thoughts, and, I was a 32-year-old man who didn't know, what I like to eat for dinner or what, I like to do in my free time because my entire life was just it's so held hostage by alcohol. It is about discovering in different, senses of the term. I love that.
And what if it didn't have to be like, yeah, I love again conscious recovery. It so colors the way I see things. What if it isn't about fixing something that's broken, right?
Yeah.
So often we're approaching any kind of healing processes. This thing is bad, it's wrong, it's broken, it's not working right. I need to fix it. Well, is it that, or do we need to change the fact that you're looking at it through this lens of broken, and maybe the lens needs to go away and we need to start looking at things through a different lens, I wonder what that might create.
Adriana, tell us what we can expect coming up on the podcast. Any fun episodes, fun in a relative sense, I guess, and where we can find the show.
Yeah. So, well, the second part, we are on all the usual platforms. Podbean is kind of the hosting platform, and then it
Great,
goes from there to Spotify, Apple, all the usual stuff, and YouTube, because we do the video as well.
great.
So that's where people can find it. And yes, we're working on a special kind of secret surprise 100th episode, and TJ will be part of that. And I really have been taking a deep dive into some of the trauma-based therapies. I've got some people on my wish list that I would love to have on the show. Really understanding more too about the role that like nutrition. I've covered it on the podcast before, but I've got some newer folks kind of on the calendar for speaking about like gut health, for example, or nutritional stuff. I'm really curious about more with the energy work. You talked about like hands-on, but there's so much like quantum healing, like the prayer at a distance, or like working remotely with energy work and what that can do. And there's so many interesting modalities coming into the forefront around that. So I'm just excited to keep talking with pioneers and innovators and people who are seeing things through different lenses. I love always the spiritual pieces. The psychedelic movement is still hot, hot,
It
hot.
is.
And there's so much to explore there, including some of the pits. Recently, we had a guest on who was talking about, we were talking about microdosing and some of the potential risks of that, and some of the things people don't realize going into this, because it's a bit like the Wild West right now,
It is.
in this field that's so newly developing. And so I think it holds a lot of promise, but there's also a lot of potential risks. And already we're seeing people show up in rehab, with things like ketamine addictions,
Right.
because they maybe started with some therapeutic uses of it and then they kind of got hooked into the abuse of it. And so now we have a new problem, right?
Right.
So continuing to explore these kinds of topics. And I'm really fortunate that nowadays I get a lot of pitches from different people wanting to be on the show.
Yeah.
So I'm discovering people I never would have known about other ways, and I'm still got my wish list of mentors and amazing people that I want to talk with. So some really cool stuff is coming, and I'm excited about that.
So excited for you. Kaleidoscope of possibilities, alternative perspectives on mental health. Dr. Adriana Popescu. Such a enlightening conversation, and I love how it is I think it can offer a bit of hope to those who may be still struggling or looking for a path to recovery or a way to supplement finding their way from that point A to point B. So thank you so much for your time today. I'll link everything in today's show notes. So glad we crossed paths.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure to speak with you. And thank you for the work that you're doing with your podcast and just in general, getting this information out there, giving people hope. You are a gift. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll have to thank TJ for introducing us. Give him my love. I'm sure you'll see him before I do. Thanks so much, friends, for listening today and for downloading our episodes. Hopefully, you heard something that resonates with you and inspires you to help others. Check out all of our video interviews at youtube.com/Nate Kelly. You can also find me on all social platforms at Podcast Nate. Please share our podcast with one person in your life who may need it today. Addiction can be so isolating, but just know you are never alone. Lastly, friends, I have a favor to ask. Please rate and review the Sobriety Diaries on whatever platform you're currently listening on. It really helps the show gain new listeners and traction with the algorithm. Just click on our show profile, scroll down to rate and review. It just takes a few seconds. Hit the subscribe button while you're there so you never miss an upload. We're back with new episodes every Wednesday. Remember, everyone has a story. Yours could help save a life. Bye, friends.